Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Today on Earth Focus, oceans in peril and solutions to save them. Is the fish on your plate what you think it is? A new campaign tackles fish fraud. Plastics kill marine life. Bag It, the film, looks at how. And why vegetarian fish may be the future of seafood. Coming up on Earth Focus.
I tell people sometimes that I come from a different planet because the planet that I came from is very different from the planet that I live on now. Humans are endowed with the power of knowing, but we have imposed our impacts on the natural systems in a way that no other creature on the planet has done in the past, or can't imagine anything that could be as drastic as what we're doing in a comprehensive way to change the nature of nature.
Our life depends on the oceans, but today they're under threat. A new book, The Atlas of Coasts and Oceans, tells why. Author Don Heinrichsen and coastal expert Stephen Olson examine solutions to top marine challenges.
I've done 2 previous books on the world's oceans and coasts, and I had wanted for some time to take all of the data that I had accumulated in previous work, update it, and get it into the form of a maps and sidebars that were more easily accessible and understandable by a broader audience. And there seemed to be a need for this because I hadn't seen anything quite like this before. You could see atlases of oceans, but it's all, oceanography. It's not the human impact on oceans and coasts that I had wanted to bring into focus. There's overexploitation of almost every ocean marine resource you can think of. I mean, the big 3 that I like to point out, which is mangroves, seagrasses, and coral reefs, and they're usually found in that order from the shoreline outwards. They're all interlinked. They're all being overexploited. I mean, mangroves have been reduced from by 20 to 30% just since the 1980s, and this is global coverage. Seagrass beds, we're losing an area of seagrass the size of a football field every 30 minutes. The latest reports I've seen on coral reefs indicate that if we continue this destructive patterns, I mean, they're being mined for limestone, they're being overfished, they're being destroyed by bottom trawls, which are essentially like bulldozing their way along the bottom, sucking up all kinds of life forms in addition to those fish that they're targeting. They kill everything. I've seen pictures of the bottoms that have been subject to bottom trawls, and it really is like as if a bulldozer had just gone through the whole region and flattened everything. And this is happening on a regular basis throughout the world's seas, not just off the coasts of developed countries, but all over. And so this contributes to the demise of coastal and marine ecosystems as well, and just destroying, in fact, a lot of the environments in which fish thrive, the kinds of fish that we like to eat. So that's another problem that's coming to the fore. That's increased in intensity over the last 20 to 30 years, as there are more fishing boats going out, catching fewer and fewer fish. You've got people saying that if we continue along the lines we are at the moment, this will be the last century of wild fish. They'll be gone by the middle of this century.
People are part of the problem, and population is growing. It's the world's coasts that feel the impact most directly.
One way to look at it is that coasts are the primary habitat of us. About half, soon to be more, of all people are compressed into the little ribbon of land along the edges of seas and oceans. Something like 5% of the inhabited land space. So it's very much about people. The difficulty is that the change needs to be very large, and we got to move pretty quickly. And I think the coastlines are the place where we're either going to learn to live within our means on this planet or not.
What is it that's causing the dead zones?
Well, mainly it's human impacts, but particularly from agricultural activities in these vast watersheds that empty into the oceans and coasts. Nutrients, in particular nitrogen and phosphorus for fertilizers, and also pesticide residues go in, and a number of other things, including animal waste, are pulled out, sent to the rivers, which then flow into the Mississippi, which then dumps all of this in the Gulf of Mexico. And what you get after time is when all of this sort of ferments and breaks down and drops to the bottom, you get an oxygen-starved zone, because the microbes and the microorganisms that are chewing this stuff up take up oxygen in order to do that. And it creates essentially an ocean desert where no life forms higher than microorganisms can survive. And there are now more than 400 of these dead zones throughout the world, mostly in the coastlines of developed countries. We need to start thinking large scale. It's not enough anymore to do these pilot projects, which then kind of die out once the money dries up. You have to learn from them, and you have to scale them up so that you can actually have an impact. And this is the big challenge, but I think it's possible. But governments need to take these challenges more seriously, and they need to have the capacity to bring in all of the players you need to have around a table, so that you can actually have a plan that can be implementable and work in the end.
A huge problem that we face is that the governance system for the planet, which is now where more and more of these changes are occurring at that scale, is very weak.
These systems have to be managed in an integral fashion, not piecemeal, and you can't just have a fisheries management plan in place if you're not managing the ecosystems on which they depend. So they're taking a more holistic approach, and this I think is very crucial and very important if you're really serious about tackling these issues.
One of the things that we should be learning is that we tend to focus our efforts in what's called management on the end result. We measure the water quality or the reef or the numbers of fish endlessly. What we need to focus on is, what are the people doing? How are they reacting to knowledge or to changing circumstances? But it's not just about science. This is our primary habitat. And if we don't manage ourselves and our activities in a way that maintains the qualities of the place that are so wonderful for us, then we will pay a very stiff price.
Seafood is one of the most popular foods in the U.S. Most of it, 84%, is imported, but only 2% is inspected. 1 of 3 fish sold is mislabeled. Cheaper fish are substituted for more expensive species to rack up profits. Oceana, the oceans advocacy group, aims to stop seafood fraud because it hurts the oceans, our wallets, and our health.
If I'm buying this product and I'm buying something for $9 a pound and it's supposed to be grouper, is it really grouper that I'm getting, or is somebody substituting, Asian catfish or something? But a lot of the product now is processed into fillets, it's packaged, etc. And you can look at it and maybe as an expert and say, yeah, it is grouper or it is red snapper, but sometimes it can, another fish can look just like it if it's done properly. Recently, we've done in the vicinity of about 1,000 samples collected from restaurants and distributor shops, around the country, and about 50% of the time the product is not the species it's supposed to be. That's a pretty high percentage.
Seafood fraud can happen anywhere in the supply chain, and the results can be hazardous to health, particularly for people with seafood allergies. Oceana says more funding is needed for inspection and calls for better coordination between the FDA, the Customs and Border Patrol, and NOAA.
The first thing that we would like the FDA to pay attention to is correct identification of the fish. We think that you got to start with truth in labeling, and truth in labeling means selling something as what it is, not as something that is what it's not.
Oceana says a track and trace system needs to be put in place so each fish you eat can be traced every step of the way from the water to your plate. A national tracking database would minimize fraud, protect consumers' health, and curb illegal fishing.
In our opinion, it's worth it for the protection of their health, protection of their pocketbooks, and protection of the oceans.
Plastic. It's everywhere. We eat with it, package food with it, it holds our drinks. But where does it go when we're done with it? Colorado-based filmmaker Susan Barraza explains in her new film, Bag It.
Plastic is so ubiquitous. I mean, even around us where we're sitting, we could probably touch plastic if we just reach out right now. And yet it's something that we never even think about. And when I began to see what was happening in our oceans and how little plastic is actually getting recycled, I wanted to spread the word.
This story begins with a single plastic bag. One bag that I got from my local grocery store to carry home a single container of peach yogurt. Once I got home, I shoved the bag in with all the other bags, next to another bag full of other bags, and I never really thought about it. Maybe I tried not to think about it. I mean, I'm an average guy. I'm not what you consider a tree hugger. I try to be informed, I try to do the right thing, but I find that it can all be a bit overwhelming at times. I mean, we all have a lot of bags, right? Everybody does the same thing. We collect them, we shove them anywhere they'll go, like under the sink, into closets, junk drawers. We throw a pile away every now and then just to be done with them, because they're disposable, right? They were created to be thrown away.
But let's face it, there's a dirty little secret here, even if we won't admit it.
Just because plastic is disposable doesn't mean it just goes away.
Because plastic doesn't really decompose easily at all, a lot of plastics make their way into oceans where a lot of marine life is mistaking plastic for food. It used to be that whatever they were foraging for was either food or at least a natural product, but now there's a new game in town and it's plastic and it's shiny and it looks good.
Mainly what we find are fragments of plastic, stuff like this. And all this debris is coming from the North Pacific Subtropical Gyre, or the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Debris of all kinds floats into this gyre, and there it stays, swirling. Now, the problem is that when this debris is made of plastic, it doesn't biodegrade. It photodegrades. That means that sunlight breaks it down into smaller and smaller pieces, which marine life can mistake for food. So what exactly does this garbage patch look like? We went to the Algalita Marine Research Foundation for some answers. They have spent over a decade studying plastic in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's not a floating island of trash that can be cleaned up or scooped out. It's way worse than that. It's tons of little bits of plastic floating underwater, like a plastic soup. Over the years, they have seen in their trawls through the patch plastic to plankton ratios that have gone from 6:1 to as high as 40:1. What that means is that in some parts of the ocean, there is now 40 times more plastic than food. Over 260 marine species are being impacted by plastic, either through ingestion or entanglement. This 26-foot-long bride's whale was stranded on a beach in Australia and died. It was found that the whale's stomach was packed with over 19 square feet of plastic.
Just about every big animal in the ocean is down 90%. The animals aren't going to be fine unless we figure out how to help them. But imagine if every morning your breakfast was a bowl of cereal and half the stuff in the bowl was little styrofoam balls and half of it was cereal. In some parts of the ocean, there's enough plastic out there that animals are eating a lot of it, and it's not good.
A lot of the chemicals that are in our oceans are hydrophobic, and they tend to attach to plastic because it easily absorbs these chemicals. So there's also the concern of not only is this plastic not good for them because it's not part of their traditional diet, but that they're actually absorbing chemicals with these bits of plastic. And then what happens with that up the food chain?
Oftentimes the plastic industry will say when you're making a choice between paper or plastic, plastic is the better choice environmentally. Plastic is very lightweight, it takes fewer fossil fuels to transport plastic, so what's left out of the equation, very conveniently, is what happens to our plastic when it winds up into the ocean. If that were quantified and if that became part of the analysis, there would be no contest.
People can get involved in so many ways, and I hope that the film leaves people feeling empowered and not just completely hopeless and just like, oh, we are so doomed. That's what we're trying to get out there, is that we can do something.
For the single-use throwaway products, it makes no sense to take a material plastic which lasts forever to make a product we throw away.
There are many things that people can do. We would love for people to, in their day-to-day lives, lead by example, to stop using single-use disposable plastics.
Don't get plastic bottled water. It's stupid to do it. And next time you go get a burrito, don't take it out in a plastic bag. Bring your own bag. It's like you bring your wallet to the store, you bring your bag to the store. It's simple.
We need to, as consumers, put pressure on our officials, put pressure on our communities, create bag bans, polystyrene bans.
If we can stop adding more trash to the ocean will take care of itself to some degree. It can kick out the trash, the plastic, the floating plastic, onto the beaches of islands or into mainland shores. But we have to turn off the tap.
If we don't change our actions, if we don't turn off the tap and reduce the flow of plastic to our oceans, we can only imagine it's going to get worse over time.
The wild fish we eat may be gone in less than 40 years. Gone because of overfishing, pollution, and our inability to manage the world's fisheries. More than a third of the fish consumed in the United States today are farm-raised, and as global demand for seafood grows, aquaculture, or fish farming, becomes even more important. New technologies at Baltimore Center of Marine Biotechnology are helping make aquaculture better for the environment.
The easiest way to understand aquaculture is it's basically it's farming aquatic species. I work mostly with fish species here, but aquaculture extends to oysters, clams, crabs, any kind of aquatic organism that you're basically farming is aquaculture. The systems that we work with here specifically are considered recirculating aquaculture systems. So we do as much as we can to recirculate as much water as possible and to have a complete disconnect from our local environment. With population increasing worldwide and global protein demand increasing worldwide and fisheries decreasing every year, we have to find a way to solve this problem.
We really have no time to waste in developing the aquaculture methods and techniques and scaling up to a commercial scale now and get producing the food that we need to feed the world.
Scientists here have a new idea for producing marketable fish, changing what they eat. Feed made from plants instead of small wild fish.
One of the big pushes in the industry is to replace fish meal because of the scarcity of fish meal, the quality of fish meal, and most importantly, the cost and environmental impacts of fish meal. So right now we're examining 8 different diets, 4 fish meal based and 4 plant protein based, to examine what differences we have. And we have pellet versions of our diets, plant protein and fish meal. The biggest thing is overfishing. Even though for fish meal production we're mostly catching fish that aren't directly consumed by humans, we're still catching a huge number of fish out of the wild, and that number is dwindling every year, and the price is increasing. One of the other big factors that's a huge concern is contamination, with PCB contamination and mercury content in wild fish that's then caught and used to raise farm fish. And we can bypass all of that and create a much more sustainable product by utilizing plant proteins.
Are vegetarian diets the future for farmed fish? Scientists here think so. Plant-based fish diets reduce pressure on small fish in the oceans, fish upon which many large marine species depend.
I believe that aquaculture is the way to go in the future. For one reason is everything's contained in that system. You have control from the beginning when the fish are fingerling size all the way up until the market. You know everything that goes into that system and into that animal. In our recirculating aquaculture system, 100% of the water is recirculated. Part of the recirculation system, we have a mechanical filter that removes the solids out of the system. Normally, individuals that would use a recirculating system would dispose of those solids, usually in landfills, after dewatering them. And what we do is we collect them in a tank and let them settle and concentrate. Then we take those sludges that are concentrated on the bottom of the tank and we pump them to another tank. And in this tank we have microbes or bacteria. And what they do is they consume this sludge as a feed, as a nutrient source. And they give off a waste product of methane gas. We collect that methane gas and then we're able to burn that. We're actually able to recover probably about 10% of the energy that's put into the system in the first place, which is a significant recovery of energy.
The overall goal of all of the research that we're working on is to be able to produce a diet that is completely fish product free. I think that the future of fish that you're going to see in the market is certainly going to be aquaculture products. And one of the big things is knowing where your fish come from, knowing where they were raised and how they were raised, and now more than ever what they were raised on. And what we can say to people that are worried about the differences in fish raised on fish and fish raised on plants is that fish raised on plant meals, from our research, it's a much more sustainable product, but we've also got significantly less contamination in terms of PCB content and mercury content. And the United States is pretty good at growing plants. We've had 2 trials completed with striped bass and Mediterranean sea bream. We had taste testing panels analyze whether or not they could tell a taste difference in fish raised on fish meal-based commercial diets or plant protein-based diet. Conclusions of those trials were that they could not taste a taste difference in the fish in either species between those 2 diet types. Personally, what I'd like to see is the United States, in terms of regulations, kind of get more involved in allowing certain types of aquaculture to continue and to grow in the United States. The systems that we utilize, the recirculating systems, can effectively be deployed in any kind of an urban setting that has infrastructure in terms of water supply, water treatment, electricity supply. And so that's a big advancement as well, the ability to raise marine species profitably in the middle of the country would help grow the industry very quickly.
If I was talking to a consumer that would eat seafood once or twice a week, I would let them know, rest assured that aquaculture fish are very healthy, they're very safe, and they're really good for an environment.
On land we have parks, we have reserves, we have sanctuaries, if you will. We protect watersheds that we know are vital to our lives. We haven't done very much of this in the ocean. We can see that we are the vectors of change. The CO2 in the atmosphere is a driver of many things. Global warming, sea level rise, climate change, ocean acidification. Now we know, but are we really taking it seriously? Aren't we a little slow to react now that we understand how important this is? A precautionary principle would suggest it makes sense to do everything we can, knowing that there's a good chance that if we don't do these things, we're going to cause the collapse of much that we care about. My wish was to ignite public support, to use their powers, to communicate, use their powers, to educate, use their powers to bring about policies that will protect the ocean as if our lives depend on it, because actually they do.
Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world. To learn more, visit linktv.org.